Hello and welcome to the cooking demonstrations training presentation. My name is Tina Miller and I am a assistant professor at Madonna University in the Nutrition and Dietetics program there. For much of my career, I've been a consumer educator. I've spent several years working in the retail setting for a variety of supermarkets. And I also spent a handful of years at United Dairy Industry of Michigan, again, as a consumer educator and nutrition outreach manager. So today what I'm going to do is share with you tips on how to present effective cooking demonstrations. And these are going to be important tips for you because as registered dietitians, teaching through food will be very important to you. Okay. All right, so we'll start with some of the objectives here. We're going to describe at least 3 benefits of using cooking demonstrations to teach health and wellness. What are the key steps to create a successful nutrition cooking demo presentation? And what are some of the unique food safety and sampling requirements when you're doing cooking demonstrations in a variety of settings? So why? Why do we use cooking demonstrations? Well, as I alluded to earlier, as nutrition educators, registered dietitians, we teach nutrition through food and using food to help individuals make healthier lifestyle choices. We eat food, we don't eat individual nutrients. And the other thing is we can use these cooking demonstration trainings to help expand skills and build confidence in the home cooks so that they feel more comfortable and confident making food in their own kitchen. So enhancing nutrition utilizing cooking demonstrations is really important when we think about some of the key issues that our nation faces. And again, for at least a decade now, the nutrients of concern by the dietary guidelines for Americans are calcium, vitamin D, potassium, and fiber. We're just not getting enough of those essential nutrients in our diet. And we know what an important role they play in health. In fact, it's true that 80% of Americans or more are not getting enough dairy in their diet. Really, 3 servings per day of milk, cheese, yogurt, dairy foods is what is the recommendation. And 90% of Americans aren't getting enough vegetables and fruit in their diet. 5 cups a day is what we really need. 2 to 3 servings of fruit per day and 3 to 4 servings of vegetables per day. And that really is the minimum. So another thing that people are really concerned about today is about sustainability. Where does their food come from? And how does the food that they purchase impact the planet? So for the role of dairy in sustainable nutrition, it's important to note that dairy is a sustainable product. It contributes less than 2% of total greenhouse gas emissions, and they're continually improving. Dairy foods that you purchase are locally grown. There's over 1,200 Michigan dairy farmers. So when you walk into a grocery store and you purchase milk or you purchase cheese, most likely that milk came from a Michigan dairy farmer. Definitely the milk has come from a Michigan dairy farmer. And, every year they're getting better and better at being sustainable with a goal to be carbon neutral by 2050. And actually they're hoping to do that sooner. Okay, so cooking demo, how do you begin, right? So the first thing you need to do is think about what is your goal? What is your purpose? So what do you want to teach? Am I teaching a group of people who were newly diagnosed with diabetes how to cook with more nutritious, higher fiber foods and reducing the refined grains in their diet and added sugars in their diet. What is my purpose? If that were my purpose, then I'd be thinking of picking recipes and cooking methods that would help support health for that population. So in my population of people with diabetes, then I'd be thinking about cooking with whole grains. So maybe I'm going to demonstrate a recipe that includes quinoa or whole grain pasta, um, or even increase the amount of beans and legumes, and methods that will help support health in that population would be things like, broiling, baking, and not deep frying foods would be very important. The other thing that you need to think about, and we're going to walk through each of these today, um, factors you need to consider. So, what is the venue you're going to be presenting at and the location? What's going to be your equipment needs? Will there be electricity there? Are there work surfaces? Are there sinks? All kinds of things. Food transportation. How are you going to get hot foods to a location? How are you going to transport cold foods that you need to keep cold? So that food safety aspect always has to be considered. How much time do you have? And remember, you always need to leave time for questions and answers. Who's your audience? How old are they? How many people will be there? And again, topic and theme. Once you consider all of these, then you're going to be considering, what is my recipe? Because your recipe selection needs to take into account all of these factors, as well as the goal or purpose of your presentation. You'll also want to prepare your talking points, handouts, resources, and don't forget to plan time to clean up. Okay, so thinking about venue options, what is your group that you're presenting to? Are you presenting on campus to a group of students? Are you doing a worksite wellness presentation, community, business-based? You can do cooking demos at a variety of health fairs, done a lot in media, both traditional and social media. And you can see that here I have a former student of mine, Amy, doing a quick Instagram video on how to make a microwave mac and cheese, a little healthier mac and cheese recipe. And you can see in the pictures below, there's some images working with the local media. At the peak of COVID, we were doing media segments where everything was transmitted via our phones. So it was really interesting, but there are so many things to consider with that. Social media in your generation is really going to be the way to communicate with your peers and your audiences. So thinking about, Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and Twitter, even different ways to communicate those messages, but don't rule out too opportunities to do TV segments or radio segments. Don't forget, you can do your own blogs and vlogs. So different venue options also include things like consumer cooking classes, maybe doing something at food insecurity programs, like a food bank. So you can teach people how to make healthier recipes with the foods that they get at that food bank. And again, community expos like health fairs, senior women, kids expos. And then, of course, back to that whole idea of doing video presentations. And like I'm doing today, I'm doing a Zoom presentation I'm recording for you. Okay. So when you're thinking about your demonstration, you need to know in advance what's available to you. Will you have a table to work on, or do I need to bring a portable table? Do you have a stovetop and an oven, or do I need to bring all of the appliances that I need to utilize? Is there a refrigerator, or do I have to get creative with a cooler? Will I have access to electricity? Is there a sink and running water to wash my dishes or make sure things are sanitized? Do I have nothing? So this example here is I'm at the country TV, country radio station with one of our farmers, Caitlin Packard, and we're doing healthy holiday treats. And there was nothing but electricity at this site. So we set up a table, I brought in some burners, and there are different things that you can do to help accommodate these kinds of sites. And we'll talk more about that. Okay, so think about what you'll need. Once toward the end, after you've considered all of your venue and site options, and you're thinking about your recipe, remember all the things that you'll need to transport your food. If I'm bringing food that needs to remain cold until I start working with it, then I'm going to need a cooler and ice packs. You'll want to prep your ingredients ahead of time. You'll really want to, unless you're teaching somebody how to cut an onion, they don't really want to watch you do it. So I would have all my ingredients prepped in advance. Bring a completed dish so people can see what you're working toward. Disposable gloves, a thermometer. We're going to go through a lot of these in detail, but serving and sampling supplies, and then everything you need to use to create that recipe, from mixing spoons to mixing bowls to a trash bag to throw your trash away. And then antibacterial, unscented antibacterial wipes to clean surfaces. Okay, and we're going backward here. Sorry about that. Okay, so if you're at a location where you don't have access to running water and you're going to be serving samples to individuals, you're going to need a couple of things. One is you're going to need a hand washing station. And that hand washing station can be set up very simply. You just need a large gallon or 3-gallon container with a spigot so that you can run some water. You're going to need a little bit of hand soap, and you'll need paper towels, and then a bucket underneath that spigot so that you can collect any runoff water. And really the way you do this is you wet your hands, you get a little bit of the soap, and you wash for 20 seconds, singing ABCs or whatever you sing. Turn the spigot back on and rinse your hands, turn it off, and grab some paper towels, dry your hands. You can't use cloth towels, reusable towels for hand washing. And of course, again, a trash can to collect your waste. So if you want to create a sanitizing solution for cleaning surfaces, it's really easy to do. You don't need a ton of chlorine bleach. It's truly 2 teaspoons of chlorine per gallon of water. And that is the right amount that you need to create a disinfectant. You don't want to use too much, and you don't want to use too little. If you're, again, doing a presentation at a site where you have to have a food license, a temporary food license, we'll talk about that. You're going to want to make sure that you have the correct test strips available for testing your sanitizing solution. Sanitizing guidelines. So if you don't have a 3-compartment sink available to you, say you're doing multiple cooking demonstrations. Now, if you're just doing one demonstration, a thing I commonly do is once I've unloaded my cooler, I just load all my dirty dishes back in my cooler, take them home and run them in the dishwasher. But if you're going to be doing multiple cooking demonstrations at the same site and you need to wash dishes, utensils, you're going to need a 3-compartment sink. Again, if you're doing a demonstration where there will be a health department check and a temporary food license, I've done those types of presentations at the Grand Rapids Wine, Beer, and Food Show, where we've had to set up this type of temporary 3-compartment sink. At the Novi Women's Show, the same kind of a setup needed to be done. So there is a need for it, but you don't have to have it if you're only doing a single presentation and you're not reusing your dishes. But what you'll do is you'll set up 3 compartments. Here, really just using little dish pans, average standard size dish pans you can find at a Walmart or a Meijer or just a regular department store. So these typically hold about 5 gallons of water. You'd want to fill them about half full, and add dish soap to your warm water. Change it every couple of hours. And here you need a washcloth to use to clean your dishes. You'll need a rinse sink. So that's just warm, clear water. And then a sanitized sink or container with a sanitizing solution. You can use bleach that I referred to earlier, or if you're using a culinary sanitizer, remember that you'll need to use the correct proportions, and you'll need to get test strips. Those are available at many restaurant supply stores. I run into a Gordon food service store and I can pick up those things. And you need to remember that you have to air dry your dishes. Have clean cloths, paper towels on hand to replace dirty dishcloths that you've used previously, to replace or to place underneath your drainer so that it's not leaking water on the floor and creating a hazard. We don't want you to slip and fall. So these are the sanitation guidelines you'll need to follow. And again, you don't need to use this unless you're doing multiple demonstrations and you need to reuse some of your equipment. Okay, so talking about transportation and food safety. So the best thing in the world they ever invented was a rolling cooler. So I love my cooler with wheels and a handle that I can pull. And I put my ingredients that need to remain chilled in my cooler. Couple things to think about. If I'm using raw meat, say for example, I'm teaching people how to create a dish using chicken. What I'll want to do is make sure my raw chicken is wrapped and sealed and is at the bottom of the cooler so that its juices can't leak on any other of the foods. And then I'll pack my perishable foods on top of that, separating everything with a couple of ice packs to make sure it stays cold. And remember, a full cooler will stay colder longer than a half full cooler. So please try to pack as many things as you can together in the cooler with adequate ice in adequate ice packs to maintain that proper temperature. Another rule of thumb is if you are using raw meats, you can also pack a separate smaller cooler and keep the raw meats separate from all of your other perishable items. That's not a bad idea either, but just remember in that cooler to make sure you have a nice amount of ice packs. We want to maintain temperatures 40 and below. If you're bringing any prepared dishes that you want to sample, those have to be held at proper temperature as well. So if it's something hot, you'll need to keep that food hot. Now, in institutional settings, we often have things called Cambros, insulated carriers that you can put food service pans in to transport. Well, if you're doing a demo from your own personal business or private practice, you may not have a Cambro, but some things that really do help transport hot foods would be using a warm crock pot and then insulating that. And you can insulate that crock pot simply by wrapping it in several towels to help hold the heat in. And remember, you want to make sure your temperature is safe, and that's going to be above 145 or below 40 degrees. Keep foods out of that temperature danger zone. I did a presentation at a big Veg Fest festival. And one of the things that happened was we were serving samples to 200 people. And I pre-made my dishes in a certified kitchen and wrapped those up and brought them to temperature and transported them By temperature, I mean I brought them down to a cold transport temperature of basically about 38 degrees. So I kept those cold, transported them, put them on a cart, and I was also exhibiting at this Veg Fest. Well, I had my trays of food to be reheated and served during my demonstration on a cart and found that the refrigerator was locked. So I went to the organizer of the event and they said, you can just leave your food there. I'll get right over there and put it away. Well, guess what? They didn't get right over there and put it away. And I went to reheat my food. And of course, as I'm pulling it out of the refrigerator, here comes the health department to check to make sure it was kept at proper temperatures. It had just been put in that refrigerator, not even a half hour before my presentation. Everything was about 42 to 45 degrees. We couldn't use that. That was a hard lesson to learn. Always keep control of your food. So know that it's really important to make sure your food's handled properly, and in all circumstances, make sure if somebody's going to do something for you, that they follow through. Check on them. And of course, you need to follow sanitation guidelines as well. Hand washing is so important. Long hair, pull it back. Using gloves is important as well. Okay, so this is a busy slide. You should be getting copies of this presentation, but in order to comply with food safety requirements, you're going to want several things. So digital thermometer is important, ranging from 0 to 220 degrees Fahrenheit. The health department does want to see a digital thermometer. Cold storage, thinking about coolers with enough ice to maintain temperature, as well as hot storage, as we just discussed. Disposable gloves are to be used along with proper hand washing, not as a replacement. And please note, hand sanitizer does not replace proper hand washing. And also make sure you bring containers, plastic wrap, foil, Ziploc bags, Sharpies for marking and labeling. Say you're doing a presentation on site. So at the Women's Expo, at the Novi Expo Center, which is now Suburban Showcase, we would have a working refrigerator on site. So I would do most of my prep there on site, and then I would label, wrap, and put all of my items in the refrigerator there. And you want to make sure that you mark it and date it just like you would in quantity food service. Trash containers with bags, boxes, tables, or skids to keep your food off the floor. Just like in an institutional kitchen, any food or sampling supplies that you bring cannot be stored on the ground. They have to be 6 inches or more above ground. And I've made use of boxes that I bring, tchotchkes to give away, or handouts that I give away to help elevate those types of food and sampling items. Hair restraints, again, pull your hair back. You may be required to wear a hat or a hairnet. Aprons are always good to bring, or a chef coat if you have one. And then remember, you also need single serve items for sampling. So little souffle cups, disposable plasticware. It all has to be one-time use items. In this link, in this presentation, I've included a link to the Michigan Temporary Food License Regulations, so you can take a look at that. So this is if you're sampling at a place where you're going to be inspected by the health department, you need everything I've just discussed. If you're not inspected by the health department, you still want to follow these food safety guidelines. All right, so let's move on to time. So here are some of the ideal time lengths for presentations. If you're doing a community presentation where you're showing them how to put together a meal, whether it's live or virtual via Zoom, you're going to want to allow 30 to 60 minutes. Really, 20 to 30 minutes is ideal. Always leave time for questions and answers. If you're live and sampling, you're going to need a lot of time to distribute samples as well. And please remember that you need adequate prep time prior to your presentation. You need time to shop for your groceries, prepare items, make sure you have all your equipment together. I would always plan 4 to 8 hours at a minimum for any presentation that I would do to make sure I had all my ducks in a row. If you're doing a traditional TV news type of segment, allow 2 to 4 minutes. Closer to 2 minutes is what they're trying to keep you to. And for Facebook Live, same kind of setup as you would use for TV. Some people try to use Facebook Live as a way to use more like a community presentation. And that can work. I haven't had a lot of success with that in the past, but other dietitians have been very successful doing that. If you're doing a web-based video, 1 to 1.5 minutes max, so like a Google video, tasty style video, that's where you're just showing rapidly how to put the ingredients together. That's 30 to 60 seconds. And if you're doing a TikTok or an Instagram, those need to be less than 60 seconds. So think 59 seconds. And those are very popular too. So you really have to condense your message to be effective there. Okay, now let's think about who's our audience. Why? Because we need to make sure that we're presenting content appropriate for our audience, correct? So adults, so we do have busy families, young singles, maybe people who live on campus, senior citizens, children, lots of fun with kids. Here is a cooking class that I helped judge a cooking contest at Le Chat Gourmet with United Dairy, and that was a lot of fun. And just keep in mind also cultural and ethnic preferences and differences in the groups that you work with, as well as social economic status. This is really critical if you're working with food banks and food pantries. Your group size. If your group size is really small, make it interactive. Consider hands-on activities. We'll talk a little bit about that too. If you have a very large group, well, they can observe your demonstration. Make sure that you have tools to increase visibility like overhead mirrors or cameras with screens, maybe TV monitors on the sides of the stage. If you're going to sample to larger groups as well, you're going to want to have help with that sampling. If you've got a group of 200 people, or even 100 people, or even 50 people, you might need an extra pair of hands to help distribute those samples. So check to see if the facility has individuals on hand who will help with sampling, or if you need to bring a person with you to help with that sampling as well. Okay, and now your topic selection. Get creative and consider all types of things. So what are your seasonal influences? What are your meal occasion influences? So if I want to focus on maybe lunch meals during back to school season, that's a great topic. And then what if I have a group that is, it needs health and wellness training, back to that diabetes group that I referenced earlier. Or you just want to teach people how to make meals easily that are healthier. And that's really important too. You think about senior centers, cooking for 1 or 2, or busy families, rushing between work and school, and how do I get a healthy dinner on the table quickly? What about after school snacks for kids? So there's all sorts of topics, but when you're considering your presentation, think about your topic and how you want to present it. And maybe you can tie several types of topic ideas together, like I discussed back to school with a healthy lunch packing. Also, when you think about topic selection, if you're really running out of inspiration, every month there seems to be a food celebration. So January, we have resolutions. It's also National Soup Month. April, Soy Foods Month. June, Dairy Month. September, Family Meals Month. That's a great one to take advantage of. And of course, December, holidays. It's National Pear Month. Okay. Now, now we're finally at the point where we can select our recipe because we have an idea of what we have available to us at our venue. We know the audience we're presenting to. We know the message that we need to communicate. What is the goal, the mission of this presentation? Then let's select a recipe that will work with all of these factors. So think about recipe ingredients. These, you're going to talk about your ingredients as you go through your presentation. These are the things that will tell these ingredients will tell your health and wellness story. Knowing your audience, are they looking for solutions or more they want to be entertained and get new ideas? Does that recipe fit your audience lifestyle? Simple, affordable for families, wholesome, healthy. You want to make sure, because you're going to be registered dietitians, when you provide a recipe to individuals, please include nutrition facts so that they know the content of the nutritional content of the recipe that you're providing them. Will your recipe work with what equipment is available to you? If you have no access to electricity and maybe you're doing something outside in a tent, then you might want to demo something like this sunflower broccoli salad that I see here. This is just made with fresh, raw ingredients. You could blanch that broccoli ahead of time, pack everything in coolers, and you can assemble it and show how to put the dressing together and how to assemble that recipe on site. No equipment needed other than your rolling cooler with plenty of ice to help keep your ingredients cold. And yes, if say you're in private practice or you're an independent dietitian and you have a sponsor. Here in Michigan, we have a lot of great local food. So you've got United Dairy, local Michigan milk farmers. You have Eden Foods. They do a lot of organic foods. It's okay for you as a health professional to mention and call out brands that you use. Excuse me. So it's okay to say that I'm sponsored. In fact, if you have somebody helping pay for the demonstration, it really is important that you disclose that when you do your presentation. Simply saying when you introduce yourself, I am so-and-so from so-and-so, and I'd like to thank my sponsor for today, United Dairy Industry of Michigan, for helping supply the ingredients for this recipe and to bring this presentation to you. Really, there's nothing wrong with that. And the last thing I want to mention here too is if you're using a recipe from a website, always cite your recipe. You'll want to make sure if you pull something from allrecipes.com and maybe you changed a couple of things on that recipe, you'll want to say recipe adapted from allrecipes.com. You want to make sure you give credit where credit is due. Okay, so here's a recipe selection. So if I'm thinking I'm going to do a presentation, easy meals, healthy families, and my target is the parents of school-age children trying to get family meals on the table, and they're trying to do it easily and quickly. And if I'm going to do this on TV, say I've got 4 minutes, which is a ton of time on TV, to present this or put together this presentation, I need to consider all of the pre-prep time. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be about 8 hours. But by the time you do your shopping, you make sure all your ingredients are ready to roll. If I'm assembling this on TV, I'm going to show how to assemble or put this recipe together. I will bring with me my rice already cooked in advance and show how to assemble the items in a slow cooker. So the black beans and rice. So why is this a good recipe for this topic and audience? And what equipment might you need? And how do I make it a full, complete meal? So these are things that you need to think about. Well, it's a great recipe for this topic because it's affordable and it's easy to assemble. Families can put it in the crock pot in the morning and they could come home to it at night and just cook up some rice to serve it on. So equipment that you'll need, slow cooker, rice cooker, and to balance it out, make it a meal. Remember, always keep in mind my plate and that we want to represent all food groups at a meal. So I would serve this with a glass of low-fat milk and a side green salad. And voila, we have a great balanced meal. So also, please model safe skills in the kitchen, model hand washing, model safe knife handling. Say you're teaching a live group. You don't have to be a chef. You don't have to be a trained culinarian, but do teach how to properly handle a knife. And you could show them how to carefully cut foods. Simply, this is a demonstration of how to hold a knife. So you're grasping the knife with your hand, your dominant hand, a thumb on the heel of the blade, and your forefinger balancing that heel of the blade with other three fingers on that handle, holding it firmly. Okay. And then you'll use your non-dominant hand and you're creating a claw. So you're chopping in front of those fingers. Keep those fingers curled. Okay. If you carry a knife, say you've got, you're teaching a live cooking class, please tell people if you're passing a knife to your cooking partner, the safest way to do that, set the knife down and let the partner pick up that knife. If you're carrying a knife from maybe a knife supply drawer to your station, always carry it point down at your side with the edge, the sharp side facing backward. Okay. Other things, again, knife and kitchen safety. We talked a lot about knife safety. But if you're working in a hot kitchen or you're teaching a cooking class, remember to use proper oven mitts and gloves. When you're pulling hot food out of an oven, don't ever use a damp rag. That's a sure way to conduct heat and burn your hands. If you're carrying a hot pan, maybe behind a cooking partner that you're with, announce hot behind. If you're opening an oven door, just announce, oven open. So people are more aware. And always, 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 please be cautious with heat, especially steam burns. People have gotten into using those Instapots and steamers quite a bit. So please be careful with those when you're releasing steam. Make sure you're not leaning right over the appliance because that's a sure way to get an unwanted facial and burn. So be careful with those steam burns. They really hurt. And of course, remember the safe food handling principles that you learn. Those 4 pillars: clean hands and surfaces, separate, don't cross-contaminate. You want to make sure you're using separate cutting boards for foods to be consumed raw and for meats and poultry and seafood. Chill, keep foods at proper temperature. We've talked about this. And of course, cook to proper temperature as well. And then that's where your digital thermometer comes in handy to make sure that things like leftovers or casserole dishes make at least 145. When we're thinking about ground meats, leftovers and ground meats should reach 165 degrees. And when we're thinking about other kinds of foods, no less than 145 degrees. Okay, now what do you talk about when you're doing your demo? One thing you really have to have is a call to action. What do you want your attendees to do after they leave your presentation? Well, hopefully they'll go home and recreate the recipe you showed them how to make, or at least use some of those healthier cooking methods that you showed them how to use. Maybe you've talked about, substitution ideas. So if I want to use less salt in a recipe, maybe I'll use a little spritz of lemon because acid will help decrease the need for salt in foods, or how I use spices. Remember to talk about your recipe ingredients. What are my unique nutrition attributes? So maybe I'm using a can of tomatoes. As I open that can, actually I have it open before I'm going to demo it, so I can just add it. Um, but think about the unique nutrition attributes of that. Canned tomatoes have lycopene, which is a great antioxidant that might help lower risk for certain cancers. And again, substitution tricks and ideas, like I mentioned about lowering the need for salt, or if I want to lower calories, maybe instead of using a full fat sour cream, I can use light sour cream or Greek yogurt in place of a full fat sour cream. Culinary tricks and prep tricks. So how you make this easy for you in advance. Say, for instance, you're making a recipe that involves some whole grain pasta, and your recipe only calls for half a box of pasta. Well, what you can do, here's a prep trick to help make life easier in the long run. Cook, tell your audience, cook that full box of pasta, take half of it, place it in a Ziploc bag with a little bit of olive oil so it doesn't stick, label, date it, put it in the refrigerator. That'll actually keep in your fridge for about a week. You can pull that out later in the week to put together a fast recipe that uses that whole grain pasta or quinoa or whatever type of grain you might be using. Talk about the nutrition information in that recipe as well. As you're walking through, as I mentioned, recipe ingredients, unique nutrition attributes, as well as the nutrition information. This is a recipe that's lower in sodium. This is a recipe that is lower in saturated fat to help promote heart health. Think about serving ideas. What do I serve this with? Do I want to make it a full meal? Serving it with a glass of milk and a side salad. Garnishing tips. We want to make it look pretty. Whenever you're presenting, always make your plate look attractive and put a garnish on it. Something as simple as a parsley sprig, or maybe a slice of orange peel. Anything to help make it look more attractive, because we do eat with our eyes. What are the meaningful messages you want to convey? So, say, for instance, we're getting back to those nutrition shortfalls in the American diet. Make sure that you send home meaningful messages. For instance, this recipe is a great source of calcium, which can help meet your calcium needs for the day. And most Americans aren't getting enough calcium. So important for bone health and other health. This recipe is also a great source of fiber. And we know we're not getting enough fiber in our diet every day. And we know that fiber is crucial for digestive health. But fiber also can play a role in helping steady or regulate blood sugar and blood cholesterol levels. So those meaningful messages speak to the need of your audience. So if you have a unique piece of cooking equipment or utensil, it's okay to mention that too. I love salad dressing containers that have pre-measured ingredients to put together different salad dressings. So I know exactly how much oil and vinegar, and maybe I'm adding a apple cider or something to it. I'll know exactly how much to put in there, and I can cap it up and shake it up and use it after I've added my seasoning. But I think that's a cool little trick, and it's something that encourages me to make my own salad dressings at home. And it's something you can encourage your audience to easily make fresh salad dressings at home as well. And don't forget to, if you're working for an institution or you're working for yourself and you do community education classes, promote those. It's okay. Promote your business, promote your institution. It's okay. Don't be a commercial, but please make sure that you mention who you're working for, what services you offer, because people are going to like you and they're going to want to hear more from you. Okay. Before you get started with the cooking demo, one thing you can really do to make it easy is be organized. Put everything in its place. That French term mise en place, put everything in its place. In this example, if I'm doing something where I have to be super quick, maybe I'm doing a 2-minute TV spot or a 2 to 3 minute YouTube video, then what I'm going to do is make sure that I have set all of my pre-cut, ready to use ingredients in bowls in order that I'm going to use them. So that if I get a little nervous when I'm doing my presentation, which is normal, then at least I know I have my ingredients in order, and it helps me regain my place in that recipe segment, right? And you notice all the tools are set up, the pans are set up. And so it just makes it super easy to assemble everything that you have into your recipe and make it a smooth presentation. Okay, tips about yourself and your appearance. If you're going to be presenting to an audience, live audience, TV audience, video audience on social media, remember to tie your hair back. People don't want to see your hair falling in food. And yeah, use makeup, use powder at least to help reduce shine. Minimal jewelry, nothing that dangles into the food, please. If you wear a badge, take the badge off. Wear an apron or something to make sure that it communicates I'm wearing clothing that's appropriate. Or if you're not wearing an apron or a chef jacket, wear simple garments, things that don't have a busy pattern and are a nice color for you. Usually we say avoid white or black unless you're a chef wearing a chef jacket, just because those colors don't pick up well when you're on video. If you're doing an interview and you're being interviewed by somebody, you want to make sure that you know exactly where to stand, and you want to listen to cues from your interviewer. So they'll give you tips like, okay, so what is the final thing we need to do there? And you know, okay, I got to wrap this up quick. Also, be natural conversational. Whenever I do an interview with an individual, I make a conversation between me and the person who's interviewing me. And most of my eye contact is with that interviewer, although I will look up periodically at the camera. But you want that eye contact with the interview so that it feels very natural and not stiff. Over smile, because the one time you're looking cranky is the one time the camera's going to do a close-up on your face. I'll tell you, it happens. So over smile. And when you're working with media, remember that that camera is always on. If you have a microphone, like a lap mic hooked up to you, and the battery pack attached to you, don't go anywhere beyond the stage with that. So if you need to go to the restroom, take the mic off. Okay, and presentation tips. This is a former student of mine. She's an EMU grad, and her name is Callie Gavoric, and she's a very successful registered dietitian now. She's doing a TV interview with Tati on Live in the D. And a couple of things that you really want to pay attention to. I'm going to start in the middle of the slide, the rule of 3. And this goes in 2 different ways. I want you to have 3 key meaningful messages that you're taking home. And the traditional rule of 3 that you'll follow, tell them what you're going to tell them, show them, and then tell them what you already told them. And then for your 3 key messages, maybe you're talking about ways to reduce salt in the diet. And my 3 key messages are: 1, use lower sodium prepared foods, canned foods. Number 2, substitute spices, such as a little bit of lemon or great blends like herbs de Provence, or add some thyme. Those are salt-free ways to add flavor. And number 3, always taste before you add any added salt at the table and discourage people from adding extra salt. So those are three key points to help reduce sodium in a person's diet. Actions, call to action points that they can take home and follow. And again, short sound bites are easy for them to, easy for your audience to remember. So something like spice instead of salt, use herbs instead of salt, use lemon instead of salt. Sound bites that are really easy. If you're doing a presentation at a TV studio or as part of a radio station, number one, ingredients should always be set up in order of flow. Number two, you should always have a prepared dish ready so that the audience can see what the end result is. What if you run out of time? It does happen. And then lastly, bring samples for the crew. They'll invite you back if you take good care of them. So, okay. And then finally, always provide a recipe to the TV station, radio station, or provided on the social media, a link to it in social media, because your viewers are going to want to know how to recreate that. And mention social media handles as well. Okay, handouts and recipes are important. You can give handouts that support your message, but the minimum I think you need to provide is a sample of your recipe, or at least access to your recipe. And if you have a website, please promote that so they know where to find out more about you. Now, when you do your demonstration activity in your dietetic internship or coordinated program, you're going to need to have some specific talking points. So I did talk about take-home points, but here are some talking points that we're going to want you to incorporate at least one or two of these. And I'm going to give you some ideas here. We want to talk about swap opportunities. This is a word that got coined at United Dairy by one of my coworkers when I was working there. So how do I modify ingredients for special diet needs? You know, how do I make a gluten-free, whole grain pancake? Can it be done? Well, what do I use to do that? And you're going to actually talk about ways to do that. I'm going to use gluten-free flour, and I'll add maybe some flaxseed to help increase the fiber content of that. So swap opportunities. So instead of using all-purpose flour, I'm going to use some gluten-free flour, and I'm adding flaxseed to help increase the fiber content. Simplify. What swap opportunities are there to simplify? People are super busy. What's a super easy thing to do? If I don't have time to cut and trim a bunch of vegetables, frozen veggies and even canned veggies can really simplify that recipe. So you can add drained canned vegetables or frozen vegetables that don't have added salt or don't have added sauce, and that will cut the time, prep time. And then tips to reduce food waste. Maybe talk about what you can do if you have leftovers from this recipe. And also, what other tips can you provide? How can I reduce the cost for this recipe on a tight budget? Like those could be for food assistance programs, college students, seniors. Maybe it requires a very expensive spice or seasoning, something that's $7 or $8 a jar. What can I substitute in place of that? That's less expensive, but will still give me the flavor. And of course, always highlight nutrition as you're going through. What are the unique nutrient attributes of the foods that you're using? And then what are the overall nutrition factors about this recipe that you create? And if you're doing an indulgent recipe, yeah, it's okay sometimes. Talk about an opportunity to teach people how to eat in moderation, so I can still incorporate some of those foods that I enjoy, show them what a true portion size looks like. So I can make substitutions, or I can enjoy this without making sacrifices. and teach them what moderation and what portion control is. Moderation is really a tough term to define for people. So a dessert 2 to 3 times a week, maybe a good rule of thumb. So always incorporate these talking points. These talking points that I've provided on these final 2 slides, at least 1 or 2 of these in your presentation, but make sure that you're getting plenty of talking points that are take-home messages in any way that you can to simplify those messages. So we're going to sum it up, and you're going to get cooking eventually. You want to identify your venue, what's available there to you at the venue, who's your audience. You're going to identify your purpose and the major message you want to communicate. Then you're going to select your recipe. From your recipe, you're going to create an outline and a shopping list. And don't forget, make an equipment list too, so you don't forget to bring something: measuring spoons, a mixing spoon, a measuring cup, cutting boards. Consider and allow enough time to prep. Decide on your final key talking points that you'll emphasize. Practice. Never, ever, ever demo a recipe that you have not already tried yourself. That's a sure recipe for problems. If you've never done the recipe before and you try to do it for an audience, who knows what's going to happen when you're doing it. So always practice and try that recipe first. Have your handouts. If you're sampling, make sure you have those single serve sampling items. Consider food safety every step of the way and have fun. So I hope that you found this presentation useful. Lots of different resources here that you can utilize to find inspiration and guidelines. And good luck and have fun cooking. So with that, I'm going to wrap up the presentation. And if you have any questions, you'll be able to reach out to your instructor. And if you need to connect directly with me, your instructor can also provide my email for you. Thank you and happy cooking.